Coldplay back again with Moon Music. They're really hammering in this intergalactic space, out of this world vibe and theme with all of their most recent albums. And after Music of the Spheres, surely they're going to put out something great, because that one was wonderful. Yeah, I notoriously did not like Music of the Spheres, and actually the general response was very negative too, so I'm not going to try and act like I was all different to everybody else not liking it. I think at this point what Coldplay are doing is just kind of making placeholder music for their live shows, because I think a lot of what they do really translates well in a live setting. Every time you see people come out of a show seeing Coldplay, they tend to just be buzzing. They tend to be like blown away by how much effort they put into the shows and stuff like that. And I just think maybe at this point their music is kind of servicing that, and they're trying to make more music that fits that live setting. But of course, this is an album review, so I'm talking about the album itself. So I can at least appreciate and acknowledge that maybe this isn't going to sit right just listening to it in your headphones, or listening to it in your bedroom, or listening to it on a walk. Maybe seeing it in person is what they're trying to go for here. But I'm not here to review that, because I've never seen them live, and I probably won't at any point. Everything with Coldplay with their studio albums to me just falls really flat. I'm just so cold after every time I listen to an album of theirs. I'm just left wondering, is this meant to lift me in some kind of way? Is this meant to be enamoring? Is this meant to be euphoric and life affirming? Because I love music that hits like that. You probably hear me say those words on this channel a lot, anything that feels so hits you in the soul. I love that kind of music. And yet the issue is with Coldplay is that they're just not really making music that does hit that spot. If anything, it feels really empty, feels very like platitude like a lot of what they say just kind of feels like they're just saying random cliche statements that don't actually have much staying power, or don't really attach to much at all. And the music itself, you can see they're trying to create some kind of atmosphere, and yet it just washes over me every time. Thinking specifically of tracks when I talk about like the platitudes and the really on the nose lyrics, I'm focusing more so on tracks like Feels Like I'm Falling in Love, which just has the very cliche, this is the first time that I'm falling in love and it feels like that once again. And it's just like said in the most ordinary vanilla way, and vanilla can taste nice, by the way. There's nothing wrong specifically with vanilla, but just in the way that they do it here, I'm just not really buying it. I just find it really a bit soppy, a bit sappy, not really having much weight to it. Doesn't really carry much either. The lyrics just feel empty. It feels like you could be saying this about anything in any situation, and that's it. But maybe that's what they're trying to go for, because obviously anybody in any situation could hear this and perhaps relate to it. I don't know. Good Feelings as well, where it's just like forced happiness, and it's like, I think if the feelings were that good, you wouldn't have to tell me on the chorus over and over how good the feelings are. It's just like so blatantly like, and when people say like Coldplay sold out, they're one of those bands that people throw that term around with, like sold out. I think that idea is an interesting concept. It's very hard to justify or explain why you think a band has sold out. But Coldplay, I think, have got one of the best arguments for that, because when you listen to their music from the 2000s, even Parachutes, which I'm not that big of a fan of, I think it's actually kind of pretty weak in places, but the songs feel really earnest. The songs feel like they're coming from a place that has so much love pouring out of it. And I think even more particularly, like the albums that came after, like Rush of Blood to the Head, have that more. I think they're better. And of course, Viva La Vida, absolutely. There's just this earnestness to it. It feels like they're grounded. And yet now, excuse the pun, because all of their albums recently have kind of been talking about this type of thing, but it just feels like they're shooting for the stars, and they've just like never looked back, and they've lost that feeling that made that early music kind of work and it be enjoyable. I just feel like they're just way up there looking down now on their past selves and just shooting to be higher and higher and higher up. And yeah, it just does feel a bit like sellout music. Like, this is just so obviously made for some kind of like movie trailer or something, and yet their music never felt that way. And then now going back to the point I made before about the music not really feeling life affirming or really feeling like it's hitting a spot that it so desperately is trying to do. Let's talk about some tracks that I feel are doing that as well. And it's depressing to say this too, because Jon Hopkins is on a lot of this production, and I'm a big fan of Jon Hopkins, and Jon Hopkins is a big reason as to why Viva La Vida works so well and is quite easily far and away their best album, like not even close in my opinion. I think that is just easily their best one, and Jon Hopkins is such a major part for all that, and yet he's back on this album, and yet Moon Music, which is pretty, it sounds glossy and it glistens, it just kind of gets lost a bit in the stars and doesn't really have any particular direction, and doesn't really make me feel like anything other than it's nice. There was one track on their last album that people praised a bit before the album came out. It was a really long song that also did a similar thing for me, where it was like it was so trying to be atmospheric and yet it just didn't land. Final track again really musically loses me too. It just meanders, it doesn't really land on anything at any point, just really struggles to get going at all, and then the ending is just so random. It feels like something from like the 1920s or 1930s that just enters their soul, and they just kind of try and replicate that vibe from that era of music. I don't really know. All My Love, again, another track that doesn't really do anything for me on a musical level. This just sounds like they hit the most generic piano sound and just looped it. I mean, I'm sure they didn't do that, but it really does sound like that. This shit sounds like the Beatles made this song 10 times over. Like, honestly, it just sounds like I've heard this so many friggin' times before. And the lyrics are probably the sappiest they could possibly get on the entire album, and then it gets even worse when they hit with the la la la. It's like, I just can't get any cornier. I will at least say I appreciate We Pray for attempting something a bit different comparatively to what we've heard Coldplay do for the past however many years. You know, you've got the different kinds of features coming through that add a bit of a different dynamic to something that I can't really picture Coldplay usually doing. Like, when I initially saw that Little Sims was on a Coldplay song, I just dropped my jaw. I was like, how is this happening? What? But not really a highlight for her, honestly. Just really feels like her just kind of going by the motions. She does what she can with what she's given, I guess, but the only praise or positive thing I can take from it really is that, of course, now we're going to see Little Sims get some kind of boost, because of course Coldplay is such a huge artist that this is going to get streamed pretty well, and it will give Little Sims some extra recognition that she obviously deserves. But yeah, this doesn't come close to anything you've ever heard her do. And the chorus, I don't know, just kind of doesn't really go anywhere for me. It just kind of lingers in this sort of gloomy feelings, like we pray, I don't know, it just doesn't really go anywhere. It kind of reminds me of that friggin' Rixton song. Every time I hear this song, I hear that melody just really reminds me of that. I will at least as well praise the song A Terra is however you say it, for having a bit more of a pulse to it. And again, Jon Hopkins can clearly feel his influence coming through here. This beat kind of sounds like a watered down version of something that would have ended on his like Immunity album or something like that, but you can at least hear his influence coming through. And honestly, I wouldn't have minded more of the tracks having a bit more of this pulse to it, because I think it kind of worked. Not a song I'm desperately excited to go back to, but I was at least again appreciating how it sounded and had a bit of an energy to it, which I quite liked. But yeah, otherwise I'm probably just repeating stuff I've said in other Coldplay reviews, and other people will be repeating about this Coldplay album too. Unless you're like a massive Coldplay fan, I don't really know if this is going to change your mind about modern day Coldplay music really. It's not as bad as it's been for them, because I think Music of the Spheres was a real low point for the band, honestly, but it's not like a huge leap forward. It just still feels like it's missing a spark, and it's crazy because like the spark probably could have been Jon Hopkins, because he brought it out of the band for you know, Viva La Vida. Of course, Brian Eno was all over that too, so I'm sure that was another major part of as to why that worked, because Brian Eno is an absolute legend. But yeah, I just would have thought maybe seeing his name pop up on so many of the credits might have given these tracks a little bit of a spark, like I say, but it just doesn't really carry much. It still feels a little flat. I still feel like Coldplay are just missing an ingredient to make this kind of music work. Like, there's so many other bands out there that will shoot for this kind of atmospheric, you know, beautiful, arranged, like stunning piece of music, and yet they kind of hit with what they're doing. I feel like Wise Blood is a decent example, although it's not the same type of music for this, but there's just something so beautiful when you listen to a song by her. And yeah, I'm just not really getting it from this album. It's 4.5 out of 10 from me. Probably not too surprising I didn't like this. I'm sure I'm not really covering any new ground by saying I didn't like this one, to be fair. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. I thought it was worth covering, but we shall see what you think in the comments. If you agree, disagree, do you think I'm being too harsh, do you think I'm being too soft, who knows. Let me know what I should review next as well. Would love to see what you say about that. And have a good day. Subscribe. Goodbye.